one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in history. Before this story begins, it's important to understand one thing. Everything you are about to hear is based on a real historical event. The names, the dates, the location, and the main sequence of events are taken from documented records of the 1959 Dyatlov Pass Incident. Even after decades of investigation, no one has been able to explain exactly what happened. The story begins in the winter of 1959. At the time, the Soviet Union was known for its harsh winters and unforgiving mountains. One of the most dangerous mountain ranges was the northern Ural Mountains, located in what is now Sverdlovsk Oblast, Russia. On January 23, 1959, a group of experienced university students and outdoor adventurers left the city of Sverdlovsk, now called Yekaterinburg. Their goal was to complete a difficult skiing expedition across the frozen mountains. The expedition was organized by the Ural Polytechnic Institute. The leader of the group was a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov. He was respected for his leadership, careful planning, and experience in winter expeditions. The team originally consisted of 10 members. They were Igor Dyatlov, 23, Zinaida Kolmogorova, 22, Ludmila Dubinina, 20, Rustem Slobodin, 23, Yuri Doroshenko, 21, Georgy Krivonishenko, 23, Alexander Kolevatov, 24, Nikolai Thibaut Brignol, 23, Semyon Zolotaryov, 38, an experienced World War II veteran who joined the group shortly before the expedition. Yuri Yudin, 21. Every member of the expedition had experience in winter hiking. Most of them were highly trained skiers. Several had already completed extremely difficult mountain expeditions. This was not an inexperienced group. They knew exactly how to survive in freezing temperatures. Their planned route was classified as Category 3, the highest level of difficulty available in the Soviet Union at that time. The journey would take them deep into isolated wilderness, where temperatures could fall below -30 degrees Celsius. Only a few days after the expedition began, something unexpected happened. On January 28th, one member, Yuri Yudin, became seriously ill. He was suffering from severe leg and joint pain. After discussing it with the rest of the team, he made the difficult decision to return home. At the time, none of them realized that Yuri Yudin would become the only survivor of the entire expedition. The remaining 9 hikers continued their journey into the mountains. As they traveled, they kept detailed diaries. They took photographs almost every day. Those journals and photographs would later become some of the most important evidence in the investigation. On January 31st, the group reached the edge of the high mountain region. They carefully stored extra food and supplies, planning to collect them on their return journey. The next day, February 1st, 1959, they began climbing the eastern slope of a mountain known by its local Mansi name, Kholat Syakhl. Translated into English, it means Dead Mountain. The name alone sounded unsettling, but for the hikers, it was simply another mountain to cross. As the afternoon progressed, the weather suddenly changed. Powerful winds swept across the mountain. Heavy snowfall reduced visibility to almost nothing. The team lost sight of their planned route. Instead of descending into a nearby forest for shelter, they made the decision to pitch their tent directly on the exposed mountainside. Later investigations suggested they probably wanted to avoid losing altitude so they could continue their journey more easily the following morning. It seemed like a reasonable decision. No one knew that it would become their final campsite. That evening, the group prepared dinner. According to recovered evidence, they changed into warmer clothing, wrote in their journals, and appeared to be in good spirits. Nothing suggested danger. Nothing suggested fear. Nothing suggested that within a matter of hours, something would happen that would become one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in modern history. That night, high on the frozen slopes of Dead Mountain, the silence of the snow-covered wilderness would be broken forever. The group was expected to send a telegram as soon as they reached the final stage of their journey. Days passed, but no message ever arrived. At first, their families were not too worried. Experienced hikers were often delayed by bad weather, but as more time passed, concern quickly turned into panic. On February 20th, 1959, the Soviet authorities finally organized a large search operation. Students, experienced mountaineers, soldiers, and rescue teams searched the frozen mountains. For 6 days, they found nothing. Then, on February 26th, searchers spotted something strange on the snowy slope of Kholat Syakhl. It was the expedition's tent, half buried beneath the snow. At first glance, it looked abandoned, but when investigators moved closer, they noticed something terrifying. The tent had not been opened from the entrance. Instead, it had been slashed open from the inside. Several long knife cuts ran through the fabric. It looked as though the hikers had desperately cut their own way out. Inside the tent, their backpacks, boots, warm clothing, food, cameras, diaries, and personal belongings were still there. Nothing appeared to be stolen. The temperature that night was estimated to be below -25 degrees Celsius, -13 degrees Fahrenheit. No experienced mountaineer would willingly leave a tent, barefoot, or without winter clothing, unless they believed staying inside was even more dangerous. Investigators followed a line of footprints leading away from the tent. The footprints told an unsettling story. They belonged to the group. Some were barefoot. Some wore only socks. A few had a single boot. None of them appeared to be running. It was as if they had calmly walked away into the freezing darkness toward the forest nearly 1.5 kilometers away. But why? What could possibly force 9 experienced hikers to abandon the only shelter they had in the middle of a deadly snowstorm? At the edge of the forest, searchers discovered the first 2 bodies. They were Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonyshenko. They were found beneath a large cedar tree. A small fire had been built nearby. Broken branches high above the tree suggested one or both of them had climbed nearly 5 meters into the cedar, possibly trying to look back toward the tent or escape something below. Both men had died from hypothermia, but there were disturbing details. Their hands were badly injured. Their fingers were torn. The bark of the cedar tree contained traces of skin. It appeared they had climbed the tree with incredible desperation. Over the following weeks, 3 more bodies were found between the cedar tree and the tent. They were Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. Their positions suggested they had been trying to return to the tent, but none of them made it. Rustem Slobodin also had a fracture to his skull. Investigators could not determine whether it occurred before or after he collapsed. Months passed before the remaining 4 hikers were found. On May 4th, 1959, their bodies were discovered beneath several meters of snow inside a narrow ravine. They were Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolovatov, Nikolai Thibault Brignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov. What investigators found shocked everyone. Several of them had suffered extremely severe internal injuries: broken ribs, a crushed chest, a massive skull fracture. Yet, there were almost no serious external wounds. One forensic expert later stated, the force required to cause such injuries was comparable to the impact of a serious car crash. Perhaps the most mysterious detail involved Lyudmila Dubinina. Her tongue was missing. Parts of her lips, soft tissue, and eyes were also gone. Years later, forensic specialists suggested these injuries were most likely caused after death by natural decomposition and scavenging animals in the harsh environment. However, at the time, the discovery fueled countless frightening theories. Another unusual finding confused investigators. Some items of clothing recovered from the victims showed elevated levels of radioactive contamination. The exact reason has never been fully established. Possible explanations have included prior occupational exposure by some members or contamination from materials they had previously handled. No conclusive answer was ever proven. The official Soviet investigation eventually concluded that the hikers died because of a compelling natural force. No further explanation was provided. The case was closed. But the questions never disappeared. More than 6 decades later, the Dyatlov Pass Incident remains one of the world's